The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to another edition of Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, this Friday evening. Early Friday evening on the 15th of November 2019, corresponding to the 17th of Rabiul Awwal, I make it, third month of the Islamic year 1441. As usual, we are broadcasting live on Luton 105.1 FM and of course also broadcasting across some of our sister stations nationally. Sheffield Link FM. Assalamu alaikum to the people of Sheffield. Peterborough, salam. Again, assalamu alaikum to people of Peterborough, Derby, Nottingham. Assalamu alaikum to all our listeners in Derby and Nottingham. And nationally and internationally, of course, assalamu alaikum to all our listeners via the Inspire FM app, or indeed if you are tuned in to us via Facebook. 01582481822 is the number here in the studio. 01582481822 is the number here in the studio. I want to hear from you good people this evening. 07779 481822 for your SMS and your WhatsApp messages. So make them short, make them sweet, but make them count. Make your voices heard. 01582 481822 07779 481822 at the number here in the studio to get in touch with me live from the studios of Inspire FM. And Jummah Mubarak to all of our listeners, inshallah. I pray that the day has gone by well. Right, so we've got a number of stories lined up for you this evening, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to be covering a couple of international stories as well as national stories. We're going to be starting off by discussing Babri Masjid. Babri Masjid. Do you remember Babri Masjid in India? Right, Babri Masjid in India. So we're going to be covering the story on Babri Masjid. I don't know if some of you followed the recent news with regards to Babri Masjid. Now, Babri Masjid was the masjid in Ayodhya in India, right, which was destroyed, which was made shaheed by some members of the far-right Hindu nationalist movement in India. And this is back in the early 1990s. So a lot of you probably weren't born at that time. So a lot of you probably were born. But in 1992 was demolished by a mob of radical Hindus. Recently, the case has been decided in the courts, in the Supreme Court of India. We're going to be discussing that because the Indian Supreme Court has made a rather controversial, I could use a firmer word than that, but it's made a very controversial judgment. So we're going to be going over across to India to get an update in terms of what's been happening on this particular case. So that's Babri Masjid. If you're amongst those who remember the times of Babri Masjid, when the Babri Masjid was destroyed, was made shaheed, then do get in touch, please. So that's going to be the first international story we're going to be covering. We're going to be going from there, from an international story in India. We're going to be coming local. We're going to be coming national, rather, and we're going to be covering a very positive story with regards to a Muslim sister based in Nottingham. A gifted teenager who, hang on, and I just want you to listen to this, who couldn't speak English last year. Recently has come into the UK, but now a year later is on the top of her class and being nominated for a fantastic award by her school. We're going to be speaking to this teenager and speaking to a teacher, live from Nottingham. Last but not least, we've got a couple of other stories we're going to be covering this evening, inshallah ta'ala. We aim to cover this evening. I don't know if a lot of my listeners are familiar or aware of the fact that it's Islamophobia Awareness Month. Islamophobia Awareness Month, right? And it's been launched under launch 2019. It's the Islamophobia Awareness Month. A lot of activity happening nationally, up and down the country, right? So we're going to be also speaking to a number of organizations, number of activists who are going to be giving us an update and going to be providing us with some background information in terms of what is this Islamophobia Awareness Month all about. In addition to that, we're going to find out what's been happening on the ground with regards to Islamophobia. But you know what? I want to actually probe a bit further, deeper down, and ask the question, where is this Islamophobia actually all originating from? What is the root cause analysis of Islamophobia? Who is it that is stirring all of this misunderstanding in our society with regards to Islam and the Muslims? And that's my question to you. And if you've got a view on that, get in touch. 01582 481 822. Islamophobia, what is it about for you? What do you think is the root cause of Islamophobia in our society today? 01582 481 822. 07779 481 822. And as I've said many times before, is I could sit here and discuss, for the next 2 hours, but really what gives value to this show is you, our listeners, right? Babri Masjid, Islamophobia, gifted teenager who couldn't speak English last year but now is on top of her class. Incredible stories. I want to hear your thoughts. Right, last but not least, I've got a number of other stories that I'm going to be covering later on, inshallah ta'ala, or intermittently across the 2 hours, the next 2 hours, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to be looking at Gaza. Gaza seems to have made headlines again. Okay, what's been happening in Gaza? And of course, it is that time of the year, at least it is this year and this time around, because it's not traditionally a month of elections, but December is now heralding the new fresh general elections which have been announced, and it's of course election fever all the way around. And I just couldn't help but listening to BBC Radio 4 on the way into the studio, and the whole debate with regards to the latest policy that has been launched by Labour late last night with regards to free broadband for the nation. Free broadband for the nation sounds good, doesn't it? But is it another gimmick just to get me and you to vote for Labour? What do you think of the Labour policies? What do you think of some of the policies that have been announced so far? The Labour policies on free internet. We're hearing, policies with regards to tuition fees. We're hearing policies with regards to, employment. We're hearing policies with regards to a number NHS. We're hearing a number of policies, and we're not surprised to hear these policies. It's inevitable that we're going to have the politicians promising us the world. But the question is, are they going to deliver, or are these going to be just empty rhetoric, empty words? Those are the questions that I want to get out there to my listeners this evening. Those are the questions that I've given you plenty of questions to think about. And it's impossible for you not to have a view on any of these topics. Impossible. I don't believe you don't have a view on these topics. If you got a view, please share them with me. 07779 481 822. 07779 481 822 is the number for your SMS, WhatsApp messages. You don't have to give me your name if you don't want to. If you don't want me to say your name on live on air, I won't say your name live on air, and I promise. And if you want to speak to me, pick up the phone, and trust me, I am not intimidating. I am not that scary at all, and I'll promise to be friendly and amicable as far as possible. 01582 481 822 is the number here in the studio. Right, inshallah ta'ala, the plan is to go to India, but at the moment I think we're having some technical problems in terms of trying to get through to India, so that we could then actually speak and we could start with our lead story. And the lead story, of course, was the verdict on Babri Masjid, right? The verdict on Babri Masjid. Now, Indian Muslims, of course, have expressed their disappointment at Babri Masjid verdict, right? I just want a show of hands. How many people actually followed the news story with regards to the verdict on Babri Masjid? Now, if I may be wrong, I may be totally wrong, right? But if I'm correct, right, it was almost like a sideline news item. It was almost like a sideline news item that happened, right? That was announced, right? And I don't really remember mainstream media really picking up on it and really giving it the coverage that it deserved, right? Now, why is that? What are the reasons for that, right? I want to ask the question to you, my listeners. If you follow the story, great. You can correct me and say, no, Sha'ban, you're wrong. It was covered, and I remember following it on BBC or Al Jazeera or Sky News or wherever the forum or the medium that you may have followed the story on, right? But at least I don't remember the mainstream media really giving it the coverage that it ought to have. And subhanAllah, let me just take you back to time. Right, let me take you back into time, right, and also bring you up to speed in case you missed the story or in case you missed the verdict, right? So whilst we try to get through to, our guest and our guest this evening on this subject matter is Sulaiman Khurshid, who is an Indian politician, designated senior advocate, eminent author, and a law teacher. He was the cabinet minister of the Ministry of External Affairs, and he belongs to the Indian National Congress. So I'm hoping that we're going to be able to speak to Sulaiman Khurshid very, very shortly. And he is live from India. In fact, I've just got the thumbs up from the producer saying that we have got Sulaiman Khurshid on the line. First and foremost, a very warm welcome to Friday Night Live, Sulaiman Khurshid Saab. And thank you very much for joining us from India this evening. Oops, I think we've lost Sulaiman Khurshid. I think we've lost him, so we're going to try to go back to Sulaiman Khurshid. And whilst we're waiting trying to go through, get through to Sulaiman Khurshid, let me give you an introduction. So the Indian Muslim organizations, right, have expressed their disappointment at the decision of the Supreme Court to hand over the site of the Babri Masjid to Hindus for the construction of a temple, right? I haven't received any social media messages up until now. Wallahi, if you're really familiar with this story and you really followed this story, I should have had social media messages right up by now, right? Babri Masjid is a masjid that was built in 1528 under the rule of the Mughals. Babur, he was the one who instructed the building of the Babri Masjid in India's northern province of Uttar Pradesh, right, in 1528. Now, I did my calculation earlier, and that's almost 500 years ago. 500 years ago that this masjid was built. Right, and in 1992, right, some radical, like I said, far right wing Hindus, a mob of them, lynched the Muslims and the sacred site of the masjid, and they destroyed the masjid. They destroyed the masjid. They made the masjid shaheed, and the Hindus, they claimed, this group at least claimed, one of their deities, right, this is a strange one, one of their deities, Ram, was born at the site of the mosque, right? So that's the background. I think we've got Sulaiman Saab on the call again. Sulaiman Saab, first and foremost, a warm welcome to Friday Night Live. Sorry for the technical problems, but I've just given an introduction to my listeners with regards to the verdict on the Babri Masjid, a bit of background. First and foremost, what are your views on the verdict?
Well, it's a verdict that we will all be anxiously waiting for. We've said in it that we must prepare the ground for everybody to accept it wholeheartedly, because it's been a long time and it's been a very complicated issue, and the court had a very delicate task to perform. We had said we would welcome the verdict and we would honor the verdict, and that's what I believe we've all done.
Yeah, Sulaiman, I'm a bit surprised by your comments, actually, because you say it was a delicate situation. I mean, a masjid has been standing for 500 years. A mob of individuals decide to demolish the masjid, all right? Any place of worship, whether it was a church, whether it was a temple, whether it was a synagogue, 500 years it's been standing there. You demolish it. How can that be a delicate issue? And how can we welcome a judgment when a place of worship has been destroyed? What is the signal that you're sending to the people?
Well, I think that if you look at it in isolation, you may sound right, but let's not forget that there was a title dispute on that property. You could say that a part of the original mosque was treated as being in the entitlement of Muslims, but there was also a part of that property. It's called the outer courtyard, that Muslims conceded throughout, including in the Supreme Court, that had been traditionally in the possession of Hindus, and that prayers had been performed, and that there was an idol of Lord Ram that had been established and consecrated there.
Right.
Now, this is not for third parties to question, because the very Muslims who were seeking title protection as far as the inner courtyard was concerned, had themselves in the Supreme Court conceded that the outer courtyard was with the Hindus, and that there was no issue at all about questioning the right to continue prayers in the outer courtyard.
But I think there's a fundamental problem here, Suleiman Sahab. I mean, if you're telling me the outer courtyard, okay, what was being used by Hindus for worship historically, and there was a presence of an idol. I mean, A, that doesn't give anyone the green light to go and destroy the mosque. That's A. B, it doesn't give any court therefore the right to say now the whole of that land can be used for a temple instead of a mosque. The only amicable and rational and an intelligent decision would be the fact that the mosque must remain a mosque, and if there is an area that was historically proven, right, that it was used as a temple, just as many other places, you go to Palestine, there's a very famous, you got the mosque and you got the synagogue right next to it, and you got a Christian church right next to it. You would have some kind of a model, even if there was some legitimacy to what you're saying. I mean, what in effect that the court has actually done is given a green light to the actions of a mob who have got away with destroying a mosque which has been established for 500 years, and that's not the right kind of signal you want to give to your community.
Well, that's not true. The court has very categorically said that whatever happened in 1934 by way of a riot and attempts to intrude into the mosque, whatever happened in 1949 why that mosque was desecrated and idols were placed in the mosque, and whatever happened in 1992, which is the demolition of the mosque, were all very serious acts of law, and those that the court has emphasized already. The matters are already in trial courts. Criminal proceedings are underway. Therefore, this decision doesn't affect the accountability as far as criminal law is concerned.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, I have to say, Suleiman Sahab, I'm still finding your comments very, 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 almost I would say disturbing, because of the fact is that the whole site, which clearly was a mosque, 500 years of history of being a mosque, is given away from the Muslim community to the Hindu community, and we're saying we're going to accept that. I mean, is there no plan to even challenge that decision of the Supreme Court by the Muslim community in India?
The Supreme Court decision is final. We had announced in advance that we would respect the Supreme Court decision, and it can't be put to trial afresh somewhere else in the world. This is an internal matter of our country. Supreme Court has obviously applied its mind as to what would put a closure and what would be the fairest thing to do in the circumstances. The Supreme Court has also directed that 5 acres of land be given to Muslims for construction of a mosque.
I mean, to be honest with you, Suleiman Sahab, that is a token gesture, which I've read a lot of the comments from other Muslim communities in India saying, quite frankly, we're not interested in your token gesture, Supreme Court. Thank you very much.
Well,
but you keep that to yourself.
Who are they to question?
I mean, they have got as equal right as you have, Suleiman Sahab. They are also Indian Muslims in India who are feeling genuinely grieved by this decision.
I know they may feel aggrieved, but I'm a Muslim, and if I say I have a right to a mosque there, why would another Muslim have a better right to say that he doesn't want a mosque there? Somebody doesn't want a mosque there should not be involved. Somebody who wants a mosque there should
sure. It's the political situation, Suleiman. It's not a case of I don't want a mosque. I mean, anywhere there's any piece of land where we establish a mosque, fantastic, right? But it's not the principle of establishing a mosque. It's a principle of where the mosque was established. You couldn't value that. You couldn't, protect that. And it takes me to my next question, which is, is India failing as a democracy? democracy, Suleiman Sahab. I mean, you're a member of the national, Indian National Congress, and unfortunately, what I'm seeing in India, sitting here in the UK, is a so-called democracy that is failing its, minorities. I mean, you have Muslims who have been lynched in India because they're eating beef, or they have so-called, been involved with the beef trade. You have you have minorities like the Christian minorities and other religious minorities being, mistreated in India, and now we have this case which is really an indictment and a green light to the Hindu mobs and the right-wing agenda in India. Are we giving, is India failing as a democracy, Mr. Suleiman?
Listen, I will answer your questions if you tell me that football hooligans are destroying democracy in the UK, or people who act against the black population of the US and who are white supremacists are destroying democracy in the US. All plural societies have democratic deficits, and we have to address them from within to ensure that we overcome whatever the flaws and warts are in our societies. Yeah. And we are doing that. I don't think that we are willing to have other people judge us. If there are any suggestions, if there are any friendly gestures, we would welcome them. We don't want people to judge us. We will judge ourselves. We know what our duties are. Yeah. We are a functioning democracy. We are a good democracy. We are
Suleiman Sahab, I've got social media messages coming in. I strongly oppose the opinion of Mr. Suleiman Khurshid. To be honest, in the fold of the so-called rule of law of Supreme Court, the might is right ruling the world, and in India, and that is exactly what I'm saying. I mean, my concern, Mr. Suleiman, is the green light that you give to the far-right Hindu agenda in India, which is rampant at the moment, and we've seen that in Kashmir, and we've seen that again and again. And this is all only given a green light.
I'm deeply sorry. You are encouraging them by this conversation. Right. We are not encouraging them. We know that there is a problem. Okay. And that problem is to be resolved within Indian democracy. Right. No democracy in the world is perfect. Yeah. If we have any flaws and we have any faults, we will address them, but we can't.
But Mr. Suleiman, tell me, how is it being addressed, right? I mean, let's take the example. Okay, Pakistan's not a perfect example, but you've seen the recent gesture, the opening up of the border. You've seen the Lahore Gurdwara that's existed for, I don't know how long it's existed for, right? And a lot of the Indian commentators have praised, Pakistan for the fact that it's been able to preserve the Sikh, places of worship in Pakistan for such a long period of time, and indeed Islam protects the right of the citizens and places of worship. How are you going to be able to do that? And how are you going to be able to give security to the Muslims of India going forward, Mr. Suleiman? So sorry, I'm losing you, Mr. Suleiman. Do you want to come?
Cannot answer anybody else in the world.
Yes.
We are the third largest Muslim population in the world. Yeah. We know how to sort our things out. We have done a great deal, but I'm not saying that what we have done is enough. We may need to do more. We need to do more. You're giving us an example of very humane and generous conduct and behavior of Pakistan. Well, it's the same country. That's the same country that perpetuates terrorism against India. Yeah, okay. Cost enormous lives.
Talking about terrorism, so Mr. Suleiman, let me
balance your.
No, I agree. I think you're right. We need to balance our any discussion and debate. But Mr. Suleiman, speaking of terrorism, I mean, what is the update in Kashmir from your perspective as an Indian Muslim and a place of Kashmir where there is majority Muslims? I mean, it's almost been 2 months of a total blackout, no media reporting, restrictions on telecommunications, and a huge amount of human violations are being reported. What's your perspective on Kashmir and what is happening there at the moment?
My perspective is that we in the Congress.
Mr. Suleiman, I can't hear you. Unfortunately, I can't hear you. Can we try again? Come closer to your.
I try again. The Supreme Court is handling the matter of Kashmir.
Right.
In a couple of weeks, all the pleadings will be completed, right. And the Supreme Court will hear to what extent the government's actions can be indicted, and what extent the the steps can be accepted.
Right.
They will hear the issues on communications and freedom. They will hear issues on whether the constitutional steps that were taken to truncate the state level of status, state level of Kashmir.
Yes.
All this will be heard by the Supreme Court, and we will all be there before the Supreme Court to make sure that whatever is the concern of people of Kashmir and the rest of the country are put to the Supreme Court.
Mr. Sulaiman Khurshid, unfortunately we're running out of time, but in view of the verdict from the Supreme Court on Babri Masjid, I'm not very optimistic when it comes to Kashmir, but thank you very much for your time this evening. I know we've had a few technical problems, but thank you very much for persisting, and thank you very much for your time this evening. Lovely speaking to you. Thank you very much. Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Right, gentlemen. I mean, that was a very interesting conversation. I'm gonna go into a commercial break in about 20 seconds, right? But I do want to hear from you. I mean, that is, I can't believe what I was hearing. I want to get your thoughts. Sarwar has just sent me a message. Thank you very much, Sarwar. Supreme Court. Absolutely. I mean, I haven't got much confidence after the Babri Masjid verdict in terms of Kashmir. But let's get our listeners' thoughts when we come back from the commercial break. Until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on Inspire FM 105.1 FM on this Friday early evening, 15th of November 2019. Welcome back for those of you who have just joined, who were listening to us earlier. And it was an interesting conversation earlier that I was having with someone from the Indian National Congress, Sulaiman Khurshid, Indian politician from the Indian National Congress Party. Now, some of you may say, well, I'm not surprised, but did he raise my eyebrows? We had Sarwar. Thank you very much, Sarwar. Jazakallah khairan for your messages, strongly opposing the opinion of Sulaiman Khurshid. And I really want to reach out to my listeners. 01582 481822 is the number here in the studio. 07779 481822. Get involved with the social media debate. What did you think of that opinions that were coming from India with regards to the verdict on the Babri Masjid? Right, historically 500 years that place has been the home to the Babri Masjid, was pulled down, made shaheed by these group of mobs, and now the verdict by the Supreme Court is that it's to be handed over to the Hindu community for a Hindu temple to be built on the site of the Babri Masjid. Right, I want to hear your thoughts. 01582 481822, 07779 481822. And like I said before, I don't believe that there's not many people out there who have got an opinion, who want to voice an opinion on this issue. So I want to hear your opinion, and I'll come back to that story later on, inshallah. But we must continue with our next story, and our next story is a very positive story, mashallah. And it's always fantastic to have positive stories on the radio. We're just so accustomed to hearing negative stories all the time on radio, on media, on news, etc, etc. So whenever we get an opportunity to cover a positive story, hey, we'll never let it go. And I want to thank my sister Jabeen for this one. She sent out this story to me from Nottingham on the family page. So I thought, let me cover this story because I was really impressed. This is a story about a teenager, a gifted teenager, mashallah, who apparently couldn't speak English last year, but is now at the top of her class, right? So this is a teenager from Nottingham, right? Who couldn't speak English, on top of her class, from the Emmanuel School, I believe. Moved to England with her family from France in August last year. Has been put forward for the Nottingham Post Education Awards 2019, and of course this story is online, and you are able to read the story. I'm very glad to say that we have got both the student and the teacher live on Friday Night Live. So without any further delay, let me go straight to it's Veena Muhammad and Miss Carrick, and welcome you to Friday Night Live, and welcome you to Inspire FM radio station, broadcasting live from Luton. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi.
That must have been the Miss Carrick, is it?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So let me go to Veena. Veena, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Great story, fantastic achievement. Tell me a bit more about your story, Veena.
So, as you said, I came to England in August 2018.
Right.
Then, what I did is I was struggling. I was really struggling because I didn't understand English.
Yes.
So I tried my best to improve my English by studying at home. Then that's now how I can fluently talk English now.
Fantastic. And Miss Carrick, I mean, what was really outstanding for you from the story of an achievement and this particular student that really made you call it out?
Well, I think it was because it was really on her own that she managed to make that progress and was able to learn not only to speak and understand English, but also to be able to apply that to old texts. So she's able to analyse Shakespeare on her own, and that's a really difficult thing to do in your first language, never mind your second or third, as Veena's now on. And that's purely because she goes away on her own and keeps working and keeps rereading and keeps practising. And sometimes it's just one word that she struggles to unlock the meaning of a sentence with. Yeah. And so she'll ask for that, and once you've got that, you can see she just knows straight away the meaning of it. And to be able to do that so quickly is just incredible, really.
Wow, fantastic. So Veena, what's been the secret? I see from the article on Nottinghamshire Live that, of course, I mean, mashallah, you speak Arabic and of course you speak French. Apparently a bit of Italian and a little bit of Spanish too. So quite a few languages there. I mean, has that been the kind of the key to success here, that you've already got a grasp of a number of languages and therefore you were able to adapt and apply yourself to the English language?
Yeah, so what I did is always thinking that to not give up, because if I give up, I will not progress. So I was always thinking positively, not negatively. So if I didn't do that, I wouldn't know English that much as I know now. So yeah.
And in comparison to the other languages that you've you kind of got mastery over, how did you find English? A little easier or difficult? Or how does it rank when we're talking about Arabic and French and Italian?
I think that English is more easier than French and Arabic, because Arabic and French is really complicated, but English is really easy to understand and learn it. Yes. Okay, great. But as Miss Carrick was saying earlier, English may be a bit easier, but I mean, reading Shakespeare to Conan Doyle, they're not exactly the easiest of texts to read, and the natives struggle with those kind of texts, right? So I mean, there's a good either is I don't know, is it just comes natural to you in terms of reading those kind of texts or literature? Is it something that you enjoy? I think it's because of my teacher too, because without my teacher I wouldn't learn that much, because she explained so well. She helped me if I don't understand. When I ask questions, she answers me, and that's also 50% of my teacher that I learn English, but also that I learn at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I especially on behalf of Luton and Inspire FM and our listenership, I think we ought to congratulate first and foremost the teachers. I think it's always the teachers and the effort of the teachers that a lot of the times, unfortunately, goes unrecognized, right? So I think we need to recognize that, and a shout out for Miss Carrick here. I believe Miss Carrick, you are Veena's English teacher, correct?
That's right, yeah.
Fantastic. So we're gonna give you a shout out here, Miss Carrick. Fantastic. I mean, unfortunately, it's part of our, almost a bit of a societal issue here. Really giving the appreciation to people who add so much value to our society, to our community, in terms of public services, and teachers being one of those. So I think it's about time that we start recognizing not only the students' achievement, but also the teachers and the schools that put in so much hard effort to allow these kind of results to come forward.
All right. That's lovely of you. But it really is, mostly all of this is down to Veena and her amazing work.
Fantastic. So I mean, Veena, just very quickly, what is the secret? What is the kind of advice that you would give to other students who are listening to the show?
So my advice will be to never give up and always try your best, because then you will see the result and you will be happy. That's my advice.
So just try your best and work hard and never give up.
Yeah.
Fantastic, right? And with regards to your plans going forward, what's the plan? So are you in what? Have I got it correct, in year 11? So you're going to be doing the GCSEs this year? Is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's in the pipeline. And what's next for you? What are you kind of thinking?
So I plan to go to sixth form and trying to do to be an architect.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Very, very good. And Miss Carrick, I mean, the school, I mean, yourself, of course, you've of course raised this as a very positive news and a story. The school itself must be very proud of such an achievement, and and it's something which is of course very positive for the school itself, not just for the individual and for the teacher.
Yeah, we're incredibly proud of her. I'm incredibly proud of her, and Mr. Hobbs, the principal, definitely is, and Mrs. Morley, her head of year. It's just really an incredible story, and her progress is exceptional, and so it was an absolute pleasure to be able to nominate her for an award.
Fantastic. And I mean, generally speaking, I mean, especially, for anyone who's coming, to a foreign country, at the age of about 14 or 15, Veena was when she came over to the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, the probability of an individual struggling is very, very high. I mean, the odds are stacked up against you, right? So it must be very difficult as a school, as a teacher, to try to then, embrace and kind of, take on such a challenge from a teaching perspective. And you probably have loads of students that are, and this scenario repeated a number of times. How do you cope with that kind of challenge, Miss Carrick?
Well, at the school, we've got really excellent provision for EAL students, because we do have quite a number of them. And we do lots of staff training on how to develop resources so that they can be easily understood by people with different levels of language ability. But when you've got students like Veena who come and are just so quick at learning, it makes it far easier. But I think the power of teenagers to be able to pick up a new language when they're fully immersed in it is you'd be quite surprised anyway. But yeah, Veena's was incredibly quick, and her ability to apply that to English literature was doubly impressive. But all of our EAL students at Emmanuel are incredible in the way that they're able to just kind of embed themselves into lessons in a second language, and it really does blow me away quite regularly.
Wow. And EAL, just part of my ignorance, what does that actually represent?
Oh, sorry, English as an additional language.
Okay, English as an additional language. And out of the students, I mean, what kind of proportion or kind of percentage of students are, from the EAL kind of category?
Oh, now you've caught me on the spot on that one. So, because there's differing levels, there are some students who come to the country within their secondary school years, some may have come primary school year, and some where they were born here, but perhaps English isn't spoken at home. So there's lots of differing levels within that, but there's quite a high proportion who speak more than one language at Emmanuel. Right,
fantastic. And in terms of the Nottingham Post Education Award, so what is that then? Is that something part and parcel of the school itself, or is that at a county or a council level?
So the Nottingham Post is our local newspaper, and they do yearly education awards where students and teachers can be nominated for awards. And so I nominated Veena, and the newspaper wanted to run some stories on some of the standout candidates that had been nominated, and so they picked up Veena's nomination. So I believe the awards are in December.
Right. Fantastic. I mean, that's a very good initiative. Contrary to what I was saying earlier, that our teachers and our schools are not called out as well as they ought to be honest with you. In terms of, it's a very, very not the easiest of professions, right? And it has its challenges, for more than one reasons. Not always the best paid opportunities too necessarily, right? So we see a lot of cuts when it comes to schooling and teaching and the likes, right? but yeah, it's such a very hard task, right? So really appreciate that, and it's good that the Nottingham Post is running such a local initiative, a fantastic initiative to actually call that out. That's fantastic. And Veena, your parents must be really proud of you. What's been the feedback? What's been the feedback from the community?
Well, they were really happy, and we just did a little party at home. So to celebrate in family, that was really fun.
That's great. I hope you called Miss Carrick to that party. All right, fantastic. Okay, I mean, it's a very positive story, and like I say, I mean, it was my sister actually who forwarded the story to me, so I thought, why don't we cover this story? And she actually happens to live in the same area as yourself, Veena, in the Meadows, I believe. So I thought let's cover it. But once again, Veena, I want to congratulate you. Great, well done, a great achievement. And also, Miss Carrick, I want to also congratulate you as the teacher of the student and the school itself. Well done, great achievement, and I think it's a very positive story to help inspire a lot of other, whether it is the EAL, kind of category of students or just general students, to achieve and to work at it, especially at this particular time of the year when I guess we're fast approaching the kind of the mock examination season, which is I think pre-Christmas or just after Christmas, isn't it? And then end of year exams.
Next week for us.
Is it next week? Is it?
Yep.
Right, wow. So plenty of revision to do. On that note, Veena and Miss Carrick, thank you very much for your time this evening, and thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Live.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Veena. Thanks, Miss Carrick.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right, so that was a positive story that we were covering with a student and teacher, Veena Muhammad, who is the gifted teenager out of Nottingham, and her teacher, Miss Carrick, who's the school teacher, and again, a fantastic story, something for us to reflect upon, and a lot of my listeners will, I want to, a lot of our young listeners out there who are probably preparing for their mock exams, and so some of them I didn't know the mock exams are so early, as early as next week, right? In this particular instance, but a positive story, right? Couldn't speak English a year ago, and already achieving, top grades in an English language 1 year on, right? I asked her the question, what is the secret behind the story? And the secret is hard work, applying yourself, putting yourself, and really just hard work. And I think majority of the people that, if you ask the question, in fact, did I not read a quotation from Ronaldo, was it? Or was it Messi? A couple of days ago, someone sent me a quote saying, what is the secret behind your overnight success? And he said 17 years and so many, days, and so many months and so many days, right? There is no such thing as overnight success. It takes 17 years, 18 years to achieve those particular targets. It takes 2 years, 1 year, 3 years of hard work to achieve those particular goals. We may see a successful individual, a successful figure, but what we don't see is the 20 years that have gone behind it to allow that person to achieve the results that they've achieved. And I think that's the key point that we need to remember. Right, folks, we are coming towards the end of the first hour, and before before we go into the commercial break, we've still got a good few minutes to go. I just want to get some social media messages in that have been coming in on our lead story, and I did believe, and I did think that it's probably going to trigger quite a few calls and quite a few social media messages, and indeed I was right, at least from a social media messages perspective. Jazakallah khairan to Sawa, Jazakallah khairan to brother Asif, who's just sent in another message. Assalamu alaikum. I can't believe what that politician was talking about, and we always have such individuals. All right, so I'm just going to paraphrase your message. BMP and EDL don't go around destroying places of worship. Absolutely correct. That and that was my point with regards to democracy in India. Has it failed? Is it failing its minorities? And a bigger question is, even in Europe, we're seeing a lot of the minorities being let down. a lot of minorities, being, not, represented in these societies. Is that democracy failing? Right? Or is that just inevitable and you're always going to have bad apples? Because I think that was the argument from Suleiman Khurshid, and I must point out that he is a member of parliament, I believe. He belongs to the Indian National Congress. Okay, hang on, he may not be a member of parliament. It's not clear. In fact, okay, he may be. Indian National Congress, he is an Indian politician, suggests to me that he is an active member of parliament. That's the question that I'm raising, whether he's an active member or he was an active member of the Indian National Congress, an Indian politician. And that's the point he's raising, that India is a democracy like any other democracy. It just has a few bad apples and it has to deal with the problem. Right, listeners, your thoughts on the first two stories that we've covered this evening. Of course, Babri Masjid. Babri Masjid was the leading story that we were covering earlier. I've got a couple of quotes that I want to share with you this evening, because of course the Indian community, as any community in any country around the world, is not a homogeneous community, and it has difference of opinions in that particular community. This individual that we were speaking to was from the Indian National Congress, and he has expressed his thoughts. The All India Muslim Personnel Law Board, a bit of a mouthful, All India Muslim Personnel Law Board, a body of top Islamic clerics, said that the judgment has not served justice. Right, that the judgment has not served justice. Indian Muslim organizations have expressed disappointment at the decision of the Supreme Court to hand over the site of the Babri Masjid. Right, and of course, I was reading earlier, Ramesh, an individual who gave credit to the Muslim community in Pakistan for conserving the Gunj Gurdwara and not converting it into a mosque. A number of different quotations here, very, very interesting to see them. Right, another statement in the board expressed surprise that the court accepted all of the evidence. In fact, that the court accepted all the evidence put forward by Muslims, but still handed over the land of okay, I mean, that's incredible. Brother Asif, Sawa, if you're still listening, in a statement, the board, and this is of course the board of the I believe the board of the All India Muslim Personnel Law Board, right? So some kind of a legal body, but apparently it's a body of top Islamic clerics. So I need to figure that one out. But anyway, they expressed surprise. The court, it accepted all the evidence that was put forward by the Muslims, but yet it still handed over the land of the Babri Masjid to the Hindus to build a temple there. I don't get that. I'm sorry. Okay, and it describes the attitude of the court as painful. Right, the senior lawyer Zafariyab Jilani, who represented the Muslim body in the court, said neither equity nor justice had been served. Right, all right, and this is quite incredible, very, very quite incredible in terms of what I'm reading. Jamaat-e-Islami Hind, India, who expressed dissatisfaction with the judgment. However, it also appealed to the people of the country to honour the judgment, respect the law and maintain communal harmony. The spokesman for Babri Mosque Action Committee, Sayyid Qasim Rasul Ilyas, said that the Muslim community cannot welcome the judgment. And he said, if you dig up any old structure, you will surely find some ancient relic under that structure. Makes sense, right? And so this is not proof of a mandir under the Babri Masjid. And let me make it clear, the Supreme Court did not say the Babri Masjid was built by destroying a mandir. So, I mean, all evidence to me points towards, the case of the Muslims and the case for the Babri Masjid to be reinstated. But again, the Supreme Court has ruled elsewhere or otherwise, and therefore the Muslims are forced almost to accept that judgment. But anyway, that was our leading story that we were covering earlier. And then of course after that we were covering the story of the gifted teenager out in Nottingham, who's been achieving some fantastic results only after a year being in Nottingham and in the UK. We are going to be going into a commercial break, but if you want to share any of your thoughts, any of your comments, any of your suggestions, any of your emotions on this story that we've covered earlier. 01582481822, 01582481822. I mean, for me, something that I just can't get away with is what is the kind of signal that sends to any right-wing movement, when you can go with a bunch of 100 or 200 or 300, mobs, strong mob, and go and destroy any place of worship. I mean, that is just incredible. And surely the right of any democracy is to protect its minorities. And the news items that are coming out of India really don't give me any confidence that those minorities are being protected in India. And I know some of you may comment and may send in some messages that that's happening across Europe at the moment. Interesting. Right, but I can't say that, and I'm not going to say that. I want to hear your thoughts. 01582 481822, 0779 481822. Right, we're going to be going into commercial break. When we come back, did you know that it's currently the Islamophobia Awareness Month? Islamophobia Awareness Month, right? So are you aware of it, just out of interest? And I wonder if any of the massages are actually doing anything with regards to Islamophobia, right? Because Islamophobia, as we all know, and we've been covering it for a number of times, on a number of occasions. Let me get my English right. On a number of occasions, we've been covering this story because the statistics are showing that the problem is getting bigger. The problem is getting bigger. The problem is not going away. So we're going to be asking the question: what is this Islamophobia Awareness Month all about? What is it? What is it seeking to achieve? What are the styles and means it's using? What is the root cause analysis? What is the root cause of Islamophobia and what can be done about it? So we're going to be discussing that when we come back from the commercial break. Don't go away. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts whether this is a genuine issue that is actually being dealt with genuinely, or is it just a very disingenuous statements that are being made with regards to Islamophobia. When it comes to real action, unfortunately, there's nothing to be seen. That's what we're going to be covering when we come back from the commercial break. Don't go away. 01582 481822, 0779 481822. You are with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on Friday Night Live. We'll be back in a few minutes. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on Inspire FM 105.1 FM. Beaming to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas nationally via Inspire FM app, and of course live Facebook stream 01582 481822, 01582 481822, 0779 481822 are the number here in the studio to speak to me direct or to leave your SMS or your WhatsApp messages, social media messages. Feel free to use any medium that you choose to is more comfortable for you. But we are going to be moving on to the next story. Just a quick summary. We were covering earlier the verdict on the Indian Supreme Court verdict on the Babri Masjid case. And then we were speaking to a gifted, talented teenager who couldn't speak English a year ago, but apparently now is getting top grades in a school based out of Nottingham. And it was a very positive story we were covering earlier. But we are going to moving on to the next story now. We're going to be going on to a slightly different story, moving away from the positive theme to, unfortunately, a bit of a negative story, but perhaps some element of glimmer of hope in this story. And that's when we're talking about, or we're coming on to Islamophobia. Now, if you so some of my listeners, they may ask the question, Islamophobia, what is Islamophobia? But I hope they don't ask that question, because the reason why I say that is because it's become such a common issue now that a lot of us are familiar with the term Islamophobia, and a lot of us unfortunately have experienced the raw fruits of Islamophobia. I mean, just a cursory search in Google on Islamophobia I mean, the statistics that come out and the headlines that come out are incredible. I mean, you know, a top hit that I get is Islamophobia is thriving in all parts of British society. I mean, that's quite incredible. It's almost as if it's positive. It's almost as if it's a positive story, thriving, but of course not in a positive sense, but in a very negative sense, that i.e. it's everywhere in British society. Religious hate crimes rise 40%, Islamophobia, hate crime, you know, and you got a number of stories, record number of anti-Muslim attacks reported in UK last year, anti-Muslim hate crimes saw in the UK after Christchurch shootings, hate crime in London saw. I mean, the list just continues, and it's just becoming ridiculous, right? Now, there's a very positive initiative and a lot of positive headlines that I've seen over the last couple of days, and that's with regards to raising awareness and challenging this head on, right? And that's Islamophobia Awareness Month 2019. That's been launched, or it was launched last week on the 8th of November 2019 by the organization MEND, right? So I've got a couple of people on the line who are going to hopefully be briefing us and giving us a bit of background, a bit of current context, and giving us exactly, you know, what's happening and what are the kind of initiatives that are happening up and down the country to address this menace. Firstly, let me introduce Mohammed Shoaib Saab, who I believe is the London Regional Manager for MEND. Is that correct, Mohammed Shoaib?
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you very much for your time this evening, Mohammed Shoaib, and thank you very much for joining us on Friday Night Live. Firstly, we've also got, I believe, is it Kerry Bullivant or is it Kaleem?
Either, but yeah, Kaleem okay. Normally myself.
Fantastic. Okay, so Kaleem Bullivant, okay, from Cage, Cage spokesman. So, assalamu alaikum, Kerry, and welcome to Friday Night Live again, once again. All right, so I'm just giving a quick introduction, gentlemen, right, on Islamophobia and some of the headlines that we're seeing currently in the context of Islamophobia, right? Before we start getting into a deep dive on Islamophobia, elections are rife. We've seen a couple of days of election campaigning now becoming official. I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some dirty comments with regards to Islam and the Muslim community. We've seen that historically. It's been the cause of a lot of this backlash that we tend to see at the moment, right? And then I saw another headline not too long ago with regards to the Tory party. Yeah, that's right, the Tory party backing away from its pledge to hold an Islamophobia inquiry. Doesn't read positively, does it, Mohammed Shoaib?
No, it doesn't. And that's something that actually, as an organisation, MEND, we are looking into at the moment, is the Islamophobia, which is rife within the Conservative Party. And it's something that definitely needs to be addressed. You know, it can't be in this day and age that we have the government of today that have so much issue with Islamophobia within their own party. And I think that is what is really driving a lot of the Muslims who want to come out and vote in this election. A lot of this talk about Islamophobia, and especially the fact that we're seeing it in today's government. Yeah. This is one of the main reasons why Muslims are actually starting to become very active when it comes to the election time.
Oh, you think it's having a kind of a reverse effect, and people are becoming active when the parties that they actually should be representing them are thinking so negatively about them, right? That's an interesting thought, but let's hold it there. I want to actually go into a bit of a root cause analysis here, Kaleem, if we may, right? Where is this whole problem stemming from? Because if I'm, you know, it's not the first time I'm discussing Islamophobia on the radio station. It's not the first time I'm hearing about Islamophobia, and the year-on-year statistics. I mean, if this was a corporate, right, and if these were my P&L statistics, right, I mean, I'd be showing a chart going right up there, right, because on year we're seeing growth, a negative growth in terms of, you know, when it comes to Islamophobia and the attacks against the Muslim community. So we're doing awfully bad when it comes to trying to address this problem of Islamophobia. What is the root cause analysis, you know, from a Cage perspective when it comes to Islamophobia?
Unfortunately, what we've seen time and again over the last few years is institutionalized racism constantly dehumanizing Muslims. Now, whether that's Boris Johnson referring to Muslim women as letterboxes, or actual government policies like prevent that securitize the approach to even dealing with Muslim children as young as 4 years old. We constantly see this dehumanization in the media, in our politics, in the discourse. And when people are seen as less than human, when they're not given the same value as everybody else, suddenly what you have is a situation where for somebody to shout something at a sister while she's walking down the road or to pull her hijab off becomes an easier thing, because they're not seeing the person behind the hijab, or they're not seeing the person who they're attacking. They're merely seeing a thing, a Muslim, and not a human being who is going to have a reaction and feel something as a result of those actions.
I mean, let me give you a quote here from The Independent. Anti-Muslim prejudice is concentrated amongst those who see immigration and multiculturalism most negatively, most likely amongst white people who have lower levels of education. But of course, it continues and then starts talking about middle-class Islamophobia too, right? But I mean, this stuff that, you know, I mean, just to go back to that quote, who see immigration, who see multiculturalism most negatively. I mean, that vibe is most clearly coming from these politicians who are anti-immigration and so on and so forth. So they really bear the brunt and responsibility of this hype of Islamophobia. Is that not correct, Karim?
We saw with the Brexit debate, clear Islamophobia. One of the main attacks that both parts of the Leave campaign, Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, were using was this fear that Turkey were going to join the EU, and that there would be millions more Muslims able to come to the UK, and this is something that's been now a common theme, to use Muslims to scaremonger, and unfortunately, it's not just sort of like working class white people. Said Avasi coined the term that Islamophobia has passed the dinner table test.
Yes,
it's a safe topic of discussion to talk about what's wrong with the savages while you're at your dinner parties in middle and upper class society as well.
Right. Agreed. I want to go back to Mohammed Shoaib, right? So we've got, the election campaign fever, which is getting, to its, highest point, is obviously building up over the next couple of days and weeks, right? And these are the same parties that now, Kaleem is discussing, and who are at the forefront and at the bedrock of actually creating a lot of this, if not all of this hype of Islamophobia, targeting the Muslim community itself. I mean, it doesn't really lend much in terms of confidence in these political parties, does it? I mean, it doesn't give much of a confidence to me as an individual to say, what, Conservative Party is a party for the Muslims, or the Labour Party is a party for the Muslims, because they are the root cause analysis, by the sounds of it, for the institutional, the government policy, and the dehumanization of the Muslims and the rise of Islamophobia, right? And it seems that we're doing fantastic work in terms of raising awareness about Islam, but that for me is a symptom or a reaction, and it's not quite treating the problem from its root cause. What are your thoughts, Mohammed Shoaib?
Yeah, I mean, so the fact that you said, it doesn't seem like a certain party would be the party which Muslims would vote for, I think just on that point, as a community, we need to start moving away from identity politics and looking towards more issue-based politics. So looking at specific issues and which parties are actually representing the issues which matter to the Muslims, rather than saying that, the Labour Party or the Conservative Party look like they're more Muslim-friendly. We should be looking at which policies are they actually going to put forward that are going to match to the Muslim community.
My question wasn't about who should we vote for and who shouldn't we vote for. My point is that it doesn't give confidence, right, to the Muslim community when these mainstream parties are the root cause of the Islamophobia that we're seeing today? How do we address that problem? That's the question that I'm asking, not the question of let's got issue-based voting rather than the party identity-based voting. How do we address that? I mean, you got the Conservative Party, the Muslim community have been asking for an Islamophobia inquiry for a very, very long time. The Tories have, at least I believe, at one point pledged to hold an inquiry. Now we see the Tories backtrack. It's back on the back burner again.
Yeah. So yes, it does give us kind of less confidence in trying to understand whether the concerns of the Muslims will definitely be met. But this is where the Muslim community need to realize that the power, we have a lot of power in our hands when it comes to actually wanting to change things.
Right.
And this is where we should be able to view the situation of politics today in this country and see that, okay, there is a serious problem here. We don't have confidence in what these parties are telling us, no matter which one we vote for. So we need to make sure we get our votes heard so that they're responding to us rather than us responding to them.
All right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Kaleem, brother Kaleem. Okay. All right. So institutional government policies like prevent Schedule 7. We've seen all of this. We've seen the dehumanization. We've seen all of these comments from these lead politicians. Right. So we've got this campaign now to raise awareness about Islamophobia. Tell me more and tell my listeners more about this particular campaign. I mean, are you involved in this campaign, or is that more of a MEND initiative?
So, as far as I'm aware, Islamophobia Awareness Month was set up by MEND, and
right.
they've been taking the lead on this.
Okay.
And we, as Sage, we support like this the need for awareness on the subject.
Yeah.
Because as your other guests rightly pointed out, we need to be aware of what's going on and who's actually looking to take steps to deal with it. The problem is, this is actually one of the first times where there's clear blue water between the Tories and Labour on these issues. Whereas for too long, it was actually the Labour Party were as complicit in this as the Tory Party were. But that seems to have changed somewhat under Corbyn.
All right. Okay. All right. Fine. All right. So Muhammad Shaib, the Islamophobia Awareness Week, right? Or not the Awareness Week. Sorry, it's an Awareness Month. I'm going back to my university days when I was accustomed to Islamic Awareness Weeks, right? But I've looked at the kind of events that are happening. So it's like it's more or less a national incentive. Tell our listeners more about the Islamophobia Awareness Month, and what is it seeking to achieve?
Yeah. So it's a campaign that started a couple of years ago, not just with MEND, but with other kind of UK-based Muslim organisations.
Right.
And the objective behind that is very similar to, if I told the listeners, if you think about Black History Month, the objectives are very similar. It's about looking at a community that has been discriminated throughout history and giving a part to that community to say, these are the issues that we're facing, and everybody should understand that these are not just Muslim issues, but it's a human issue. And also, here's a chance for the Muslim community to say, these are the achievements that we have made, and we're proud of these achievements as well. So it gives the chance for everybody to be aware about Muslims, about the issues that we face, and anybody can take part. I mean, this year it's grown really big. There's about over 150 events organized just by MEND across the country, but there's a whole host of events happening outside of MEND. People are actually volunteering for the Awareness Month, and that's how it should be. It shouldn't be tied down towards a specific organization. So if somebody's listening and they want to do something for this month, they can just go ahead and do it.
All right. So I get that. It sounds positive. Sounds good. There's a side of me, or there's a part of me that almost feels that this is a bit of a reactionary or a bit of a passive thing. I mean, when you equate it to the Black History Month, right? It's almost like we've been the victims in society. We've been victims for a number of years. This is who we are. This is what we've done in the past. It's almost like we're trying to justify our position, whereas we're not trying to get on the front foot to say, look, look, guys, this is Islam, this is who the Muslims are, and all of these allegations and all of this scaremongering and all of these policies and all this institutional racism is really, is the government or these are the individuals that are the cause of it, and really, rebutting those kind of, policies and those kind of initiatives and those people who are the perpetrators of that. Is there an element of that too involved?
Yeah. So we do get that question a lot, and the way I usually respond is saying that is why we've called this month Islamophobia Awareness Month rather than Islam Awareness or Islamic History Awareness Month. Right. It's the fact that we're going ahead with that title to let people know this is what Islamophobia is. And part of that Islamophobia Awareness Month is to give some understanding of the positive contributions of Muslims. But generally as a whole, we're talking about the issues that Muslims are facing. Yeah. We're calling out the different institutes which are promoting Islamophobia, and we're making sure that Muslims, non-Muslims, everyone really does understand where this discrimination is coming from and how best they can tackle it.
All right, good. So what is the okay? So it's open to the whole community, Muslim, non-Muslim, or of course primarily I guess non-Muslim really. If we're targeting Islamophobia awareness, I mean of course it's also going to be involve Muslims. So proactive, positive message. So how can the community get involved, Muhammad Shaib?
Yes, so there's a number of different things people can do. When it comes to a very minimalist type of thing that people can get involved in this month, it's about just being aware yourself. A lot of the Muslim community themselves don't know what Islamophobia is and what are the ways that they can tackle it. So a very, very minimal thing that everyone can do is visit the MEND website or just keep up to date with any of the articles you're seeing coming out about Islamophobia and just keeping yourself up to date and aware about that. If you're somebody who wants to take a more active stance, then there are a whole host of things you can do. You can visit the MEND website and see all the resources you can hire, like exhibitions, you can download publications, you can invite speakers from MEND to come to your local masjid or community center. And we can do a lot of different talks on different aspects of Islamophobia. But if you don't want to do it with men, then you can definitely take on your own kind of initiative by organizing some sort of awareness event that your local community can be involved in.
I mean, as individuals, as a community, I mean, really, isn't it, Kaleem, more about opening up your doors and to the indigenous community, to the non-Muslim community, welcoming them. In essence, we're talking about Dawah of Islam, who we are as Muslims, Islam and the community, and really breaking down those stereotypes that do exist through these institutions, through media and so on and so forth. Isn't that in essence what we're saying, Kaleem?
So I can say alhamdulillah, like I took my shahada about almost 16 years ago now. So I'm a bit of an old hat, but I said this since the beginning, like the most important part of dawah is actually just getting out and living and representing the deen through your actions. It's not necessarily about having the greatest arguments or understanding the debating points from these sorts of YouTube videos. It's actually about going out and living and expressing and showing what Islam does to us and how it affects our character. And our Prophet ﷺ, he said that I have not come except to perfect good character. And actually when you show that sort of good character, when you live that and embody Islam's ideals, it's one of the most powerful ways to combat Islamophobia as well. Because people start to, again, as I said, see you as a human being, understand who and what we are. I think one of the things that we have to be sort of careful of, and I agree, we need to sort of humanize ourselves, we need people to understand our achievements, but as well, there's a very good poet, Suhaima Manzoor Khan, and she makes a good point in one of her poems that look, we're British. They should love us when we're failing. They should love us when we're on job seekers. They should love us when we're poorly. And if we need to prove our humanity constantly to other people, then perhaps it's not us that are lacking the humanity. Maybe it's the people that we constantly need to prove it to that seem to be lacking in basic humanity.
A very good point. I mean, earlier I was discussing on the case of Babri Masjid in India and the Indian democracy and failing its minority. I mean, almost to some people would argue that democracy and the kind of muscular liberalism, as some people have coined it, is unable to actually deal with other beliefs and other ways of life, and the only way it sees it is to actually force down its own values and principles on others, and those that have got their own values, it refuses to accept that or to be and it's incapable of being the melting pot that Islam has been for people of other faiths.
Alhamdulillah, one of the beauties of Islam is that for 1,400 years it actually created genuine multiculturalism and diversity and freedom of expression and religion, mashallah. Yeah,
absolutely. Muhammad Shoaib, so events happening nationally, I'm just reading a quotation here from is it? I mean, I think Azad used to be from MEND, but he's not. He's now Communities Relations Director for Cage, I believe. 3 pieces of advice to tackle Islamophobia: understand the oppression, self-confirmed identity, know who we are, you are, and do not allow our oppressor to set the parameters. Expand upon that a bit, if you may. What does that mean for the layman?
Yeah, I mean, that was a quote that was taken from our Islamophobia Awareness Month launch. Yeah. And what Azad is basically saying is that us ourselves, we need to understand what our relationship is between us and the oppressors, and really get to grips with that. Understand that we have our own identity, and we are firm in that identity as Muslims, and we don't need to pander to any other type of Islamic or Muslim identity that is being shown to us to be the good version. And so Azad is basically saying be firm in that and understand that it's the oppressors that are trying to give us this other type of identity, and we should be firm in saying, no, we believe what we believe and you will accept us as who we are.
All right. Okay. All right, gents. I mean, unfortunately, we're gonna go into a commercial break in about a minute. I mean, I did have a number of other questions. I don't know if you're actually available for a few more minutes after the commercial break. I'll get the producers to speak to you and confirm if you are, inshallah. Otherwise, I would love to continue. But I mean, very quickly, I've got about 40 seconds. Problem isn't getting better; it's getting worse. Current statistics are telling us that the figures are going higher and higher. How do we really fundamentally address this? Very, very briefly, Kaleem.
So, at a fundamental level, there needs to be an entire change in the rhetoric and the way that we approach how we look at Muslims. Right. At the moment, Muslims are constantly looked at through a securitized lens, through the lens of the war on terror, and until we can get beyond that, beyond looking at Muslims as a threat constantly, then we're going to constantly see this rise in attacks on Muslims and rise in Islamophobia.
Fantastic. I think that's very succinct and well put. Muhammad Shoaib and Brother Kaleem, thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time and we're going to go into a commercial break, but great speaking to you, and Jazakallah khair for your time this evening. Okay, listen, that was Brother Kaleem Bullivant from Cage spokesman, and we also had Muhammad Shoaib, who is the London regional manager for MEND. I'm going to try to consolidate some of those thoughts when I come back from the commercial break, and then also try to cover a couple of other news stories that have been making the headline. And we are now approaching fast the last half an hour of the show. We're going to go into a commercial break. 01582 481822. I want to speak to someone. Call in, speak to me. 07779 481822 for your social media messages. I'll pick those up immediately after the break. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on this Friday evening on the 15th of November 2019. It is now 19:32 according to my laptop, but 19:30 according to the clock in the studio. Either of the way. We are, of course, broadcasting live from Inspire FM Studio 105.1 FM and also broadcasting to our sister stations nationally and also broadcasting, of course, on the Inspire FM app and last but not least via the Facebook stream live online. Last half an hour opportunity to get involved in any of today's topics that we've been discussing and debating. 01582 01582481822 is the number here in the studio. Let's see if we can get someone to speak to me direct with some of those thoughts and those opinions. Otherwise, 07779481822 07779481822 for your social media messages this evening. Right, I want to jazakallah khair to Muhammad Shoaib from MEND London Regional Manager, and we also had brother Kaleem Bulivant, who is the Cage spokesman, shedding some light on a very important topic, very, very important topic. Last half an hour we were discussing this, and it's Islamophobia. Now, I don't know to what extent, our listeners, follow some of these news stories. Inshallah, I believe that they do. We're all familiar. I mean, the world is a global village, as they say today, right? So we can't get away from, seeing the headlines, seeing the attacks, seeing the discrimination, hearing the remarks, hearing the comments with regards to sometimes the Muslim community, segments of the community, and so on and so forth. And Islamophobia, is one of those issues that we have seen a stark rise over the last couple of years. So this Islamophobia Awareness Month is a very important initiative, right? It's an initiative that we definitely need to be involved in, aware of, and trying to support. And as the brother was saying earlier, the best initiative and the best way to actually address that is through ourselves as individuals, through ourselves as a part of the Muslim faith, Islamic community. And reaching out, being examples of Islam, being examples of Muslims. And I completely, subscribe to that thought by Brother Kerry, who was saying, he came to the deen 16 years ago, and for him, the most important aspect is, live your life as Muslims, proper what it means to be a Muslim, and let the community around you see you and see Islam. And when they see Islam and when they see the beauty of Islam, that in itself is a powerful means of da'wah, and there is no doubt about it. But at the same time, we are dealing with an institution. We are dealing with institutions. Let me use the plural. We're dealing with consecutive government policies, which are almost black, almost primarily there against the Muslim community. We're dealing with the likes of Prevent, Schedule 7, anti-draconian, anti-terrorism, so-called draconian legislation. We're seeing dehumanization. We're seeing some very, very derogatory, demeaning comments against the Muslim faith, against Muslims who practice in their faith and elements of the faith, and all of that in an environment which is very hostile, of course, gives rise to such behavior and action. And that's always been my point. My point has been politicians need to take accountability, need to take responsibility. Right, media needs to take responsibility. Media needs to take accountability. We need to see a lot more positive, lot more, what is the word? Accountable, right? Accountable, media, accountable, politicians who can't just say anything and get away with it, right? You can't just say anything and get away with it because it has implications, it has repercussions. And my fear is we are early into this, campaign, this political campaign, election campaign. We've got a couple of weeks left. 12th of December is the date for the elections. What are some of those comments? I hope we don't get any of those comments that really, create that kind of negative atmosphere and a negative, it's almost like what's the word? Using the events and using the community to score political points on the back end of it, right? So let's avoid and let's hope that we don't see any of that over the next couple of weeks. But saying that, The Conservative Party, other things that have been making headlines, Conservative Party has backtracked on its pledge to hold an inquiry into Islamophobia. So I think these are definitely some of these legitimate questions that need to be raised. Apparently, instead, it will hold an inquiry into all types of racism. All types of racism. Okay. I mean, all types of racism is something which is not acceptable. Agreed. But Islamophobia is the one that's really bearing the brunt of it at the moment, wouldn't you say? And it's something that really needs, an inquiry in its own right, and that was being discussed for a long time within the Conservative Party. So I'm a bit surprised to see the Conservatives backtrack on that. Apparently, Boris Johnson previously vowed to hold an inquiry into Islamophobia following accusations that scores of party members have been spreading hatred towards Muslims. But Mr. Javed told BBC's Andrew Marshall, "We will have an inquiry into prejudice, and it will absolutely mean looking into anti-Muslim hatred and making sure that our zero tolerance policy, absolute zero tolerance, is as effective as it can be, and looking to see what other procedures we could have in place." Right. When I hear that and when I read that, I mean, for a start, he could speak with his party leader and the current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and some of the comments that he's made with regards to the Islamic community and the Muslim faith, right? I mean, he doesn't have to go very far, does he? And I'm a bit surprised he makes those comments, and yet his own friend is making some very negative comments with regards to the Muslim community. But what do you think? What are your thoughts? I want to hear from you, our listeners. Right, some of the other stories that I want to cover this evening, inshallah ta'ala, as part of other news items. I mean, let me tell you earlier I was telling you that my sister, in fact, shared the positive story that we covered as a second story, and that was the gifted teenager in Nottingham. Great story that we covered earlier. But you know what? I really would like to hear from our listeners. If you've got a positive story, and unfortunately, it doesn't have to be a positive story. If there's a story that you want us to cover here at Inspire FM, why don't you write to us? Why don't you send in your suggestions that this is here's a story that ought to be covered as part of the Friday Night Live agenda, and we should be discussing it. Happy to get suggestions and thoughts from our listeners, right? So if there's any stories that have caught your attention, you want us to be covering them, feel free to share those with us, and we will cover those, right? So as I was saying earlier, Tories backtrack on pledge to hold Islamophobia inquiry. That's an interesting story, especially after commitments that were being made. And of course, Baroness Warsi has been asking for this and calling for this for a very long time, and the statistics are absolutely awful. Statistics show that the people continue to see Muslims distinctly different from other religious groups. Now here these statistics, and this is from the Independent, not too long ago, 18% of the public holding extremely negative views of Muslims. 18% of the public, right? What else? Although there has been a small decrease in the number of people who consider Islam a serious threat to Western civilization, from 44% down from 52% in July 2017. Wow. And a huge 31% of the population believe that Islam poses a threat to the British way of life. Only 32% believe that Islam and the British way of life are compatible. So you can see some of these very, very alarming statistics. And the brother earlier quoted Baroness Warsi. It would have been good to speak to her and to get an update from her, maybe for next week's show, inshallah. But Baroness Warsi, 8 years ago. Now, I mean, this is not a recent phenomenon, is it? 8 years ago, Baroness Warsi declared that Islamophobia had passed the dinner table test in Britain. Right? Dinner table test in Britain, which means you can have a go. Right? Anti-Muslim prejudice remains a huge problem in the UK, and that's the reality of it, and that's what we're discussing. How do we use the upcoming election campaigns, the hustings with some of these wannabe politicians? How do we use that? How do we use that to raise this agenda of Islamophobia? Can we use that? I think this is something that we need to consider. We need to think about, right? I want to hear your thoughts, right? I want to hear your thoughts, even though we're not covering the election campaign this week, right? And I've got a bit of a surprise for you. Hopefully we're going to be covering it in a couple of weeks, because the team in Spy FM and the team at the Friday Night Live are in the process of pulling together the candidates on a forum, and hopefully, I don't want to give it too much away, but we're hoping to bring up a special lineup of candidates and an opportunity to put questions directly to these candidates from all of the different parties. So you will get an opportunity to raise your questions directly to them. So stay tuned for when and where the opportunity will be coming, but hopefully I'm reassured that it will be coming very, very soon. Right, other news stories making headlines. I mean, Gaza's come back to make the headlines recently. I don't know if you've followed it. You gotta dig for some of these news items, unfortunately, because they're not covered by the mainstream media. I mean, the Gaza Strip, or simply Gaza, is the self-governing Palestinian territory on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And of course, we all know the suffering of the people of Palestine in Gaza. So I'm seeing these headlines: Israel-Gaza ceasefire strained by rockets and airstrikes. 2 hours ago, outdated intelligence, social media rumors behind Israel's killing of Gaza family. Astaghfirullah. 15 minutes ago, Gaza Border Communities Councils announced end of emergency situation. So it seems like things have started to fire up in Gaza once again. And Al Jazeera is reporting that the Gaza ceasefire is under pressure after renewed Israeli air attacks. Truce between Islamic Jihad and Israel came into effect on Thursday morning after 34 Palestinians were killed in raids. 34 Palestinians were killed in raids, right? So Israel's army said early on Friday it had launched fresh raids on targets linked to some of the families in Gaza after it fired a number of rockets apparently into Israel. That's a message that I'm getting in front of my desktop alert here. The announcement by the Israeli military suggested that the ceasefire reportedly brokered by Egypt was breaking down, and there is now fresh attacks. And again, another area, another region of the world where we're seeing huge amounts of suffering for decades on end. And we're not seeing an end to it in sight. So that's another news story that's been making the headlines in Gaza. Other news stories that I've already covered is, of course, the Tories' backdrop on pledge to hold Islam. We covered that already. Another story: Muslim MCB urges politicians to commit to Muslim pledges ahead of elections. Now, of course, this is the election fever. Of course, I'm seeing messages, I'm seeing emails coming through, I'm seeing social media messages come through. All right, the election of a generation, I'm hearing. Wow. The election of a generation, right? All right, so this is an email that I've seen earlier come out that, all right, so there's a number of items part of this email, but the underrepresentation of the Muslims in parliament, empowering Muslims to vote, and most importantly, why we must use our vote. Apparently, that's one of the arguments that's been put forward. I'm not too sure. What do you think? Do you have the confidence in the political system, in the political parties? Do you see that they're one of the same thing? But I'll tell you, there was an interesting comment by one of our earlier guests, which was to the effect of, it's the first time that he's seen crystal blue waters between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. Now, if I still had that guest on the call, I would have liked to ask him in what ways, in what areas he's seeing the crystal blue waters between Labour and Conservative, because historically a lot of people would argue that this is one of the same thing. I don't know what you think, my listeners. 01582 481 822. 01582 481 822. Are you seeing a sharp distinction between the political parties, their agendas, their manifestos, their policies, as they reveal them day by day as we get closer and closer to the date of the 12th of December? A lot of Muslim organizations are of course coming and now appealing to the Muslims communities. MCB, of course, one of the umbrella organizations, is urging the politicians to commit to Muslim pledges. Now, what too often we find that these commitments to Muslim pledges are, we see those commitments, but we don't see them materialize, do we? Maybe there may be a change ahead of the elections. Don't know, but anyway, let's look at what MCB is telling its constituency of masajids. MCB is calling on political parties and prospective candidates to commit to a set of pledges that would concern Muslim voters ahead of the general election. Right? So why don't you commit to a set of pledges that would concern the Muslim voters ahead of the general election? Now I can see, let me play the devil's advocate to this story, right? The devil's advocate would tell me that you got a number of Muslim politicians, year in and year out. I think gradually we've seen a trend of the number increasing. But let me ask you, my listeners, the question: are we seeing these voices representing the Muslim interests, or are we seeing them just toe the party line? What are we seeing? And I tell you why I say that, right? I tell you why I say that, because another news story that got my attention was the Labour Party. Labour ditches Birmingham MP who supported Muslims over the LGBT protests. Right? So a Birmingham MP who supported Muslim anti-LGBT teaching protesters has been rejected as a Labour candidate in the upcoming general election. Roger Godsiff was one of the city's longest serving MPs. Wow. One of the longest serving MPs, right? Non-Muslim, stands up for the Muslim, parents who are very legally within their right, protesting against a policy applied in their schools. And this particular politician, longest serving politician for the Labour Party, who's been serving there for such a long time, commanded one of the safest Labour seats in the city with a majority in excess of 33,000, was replaced. What does that tell you? What does that tell you when it comes to the politicians and the political parties? He seems to have paid for backing the protesters who objected to the promotion of LGBT to young kids in a school in his constituency, according to a lot of the people, and according to 5pillarsuk.com here. Yesterday's Labour, this is yesterday, which is some days ago, 7th of November, I believe this is from, last week. The Labour's National Executive Committee sided with local activists who said Godsiff's support for protesters at Anderton Park Primary made his position untenable. Now that is surprising to me. Very, very surprising to me. Why would that make his position untenable? Why would that? Because surely the action of the local community is legal, right? Surely a politician, and especially a local politician for that area, he's allowed to side with a particular point of view. And in this particular case, he's supporting the parents, but therefore, as a result of that, he's paying the price for backing the protesters, and he is now no longer the Labour candidate in the upcoming general elections. See, it's these kind of stories that sometimes raise question marks amongst a lot of the people. Right, a couple of stories that have been making the headlines this week, and I want to share those with you, inshallah. Aid worker. Now, this is another story that a lot of you might be familiar with, because this is one of those stories where another Muslim, by the name of Tok Sharif, right? Tok Sharif, his real name is Tawqir Sharif, right? Tawqir Sharif. Now, a story of Tawqir Sharif is he's been out in Syria for a very, very long time. He's a human rights worker based out in Syria. Been out there for a number of years, well known to some of the people from Cage. I believe he's well known to Mozambique, who's an outreach director at Cage, who says, and I quote, "I have known Tawqir Sharif since we first traveled together on an aid mission to Syria in 2012. So over 7 years he's been there since. He's dedicated his life to helping the Syrian people, made great personal sacrifices, and as a result of those sacrifices, he's been stripped of his citizenship by the British government. Now this goes back to those points that we were making earlier about government policy, institutional racism, government policy, where if you happen to be, and this has been an allegation in the past, as we saw in the case of the other sister who was stripped of her citizenship too. If you happen to be of a non-indigenous background, and then you are highly probable of being stripped of your citizenship by the government. And that is what happened to Taqir Sharif. He's been in Syria since 2012, and in 2017, let me just get the facts here correct so that I'm actually factually on safe sound ground. In 2017, the Home Office removed his British citizenship, saying it had secret intelligence, and he believed it had links to some groups who were aligned with some organizations. And Mr. Sharif denies the links, and he has called the decision unfair and racist. Now anyway, the Home Office says any decision to deprive someone of their citizenship was based on all available evidence. He was apparently requested to attend a so-called, in fact here you go, Taqir Sharif had said there is no chance of a fair trial in the partially secret Special Immigrations Appeal Commission. So there's a special secret Immigrations Appeal Commission courts, and he doesn't want to be a party of it, so he's rejected that because that process only reinforces this oppression. And subhanAllah, he's also calling on all people facing a similar situation, and especially lawyers, to boycott the SIAC court, which he says only serves as a rubber stamp to government decisions rather than a mechanism to deliver justice, right? So here you go, another Muslim who's been stripped of his British citizenship, right? And he's refusing to go through the system, this so-called special advocate system, right, which he believes reinforces, and it is an affront to justice, and there's no way in the living daylights that he's going to be able to see any justice through that system. He's got no confidence, and hence he refuses to be part of that process. But subhanallah, here we go, we're seeing a number of these stories emerge, and it's an injustice that needs to be challenged, needs to be raised, and I think that's exactly what's happening. Right, so we are coming towards the end of the show, last couple of minutes, and those were the news stories that I wanted to share with you, my listeners, on this evening, on the Friday the 15th of November, inshallah ta'ala. Look out for the next couple of weeks, news stories that will be breaking across nationally. Of course, as the election fever takes grip across the country, I'm sure there's going to be a number of stories that are going to be emerging over the next couple of days, and inshallah we will be covering those. Don't forget, very quickly, let's do a quick recap of the stories that we have covered this evening. Islamophobia Awareness Month, a lot of events that are happening actually on that particular issue, and if you actually go to the MEND website, that is mend.org.uk, you can see the number of events that have actually been launched by MEND, and they are national, all the way from the north in the Yorkshire, through to the Midlands, through to the south. I definitely do recommend that you go along to one of these events and really, educate yourself with regards to Islamophobia. What is Islamophobia in the context of Brexit, especially because we know that it's got almost a synthetic connection with anti-immigration, multiculturalism, all being thrown in the same basket, and a lot of negativity towards migrants, multiculturalism. Ultimately, the book gets thrown towards racism, Islamophobia, all in the same pot. So familiarize yourself with that, and be aware of the campaigns and the initiatives that are going to be launched over the next couple of days. And if there's something that catches your attention, just share it with us, and maybe we can make it into a story. Right, apart from that, we were covering, of course, the Babri Masjid earlier, the Supreme Court, decision on Babri Masjid. That land has now been given over to the Hindu community of India to raise a temple in the place of the Babri Masjid, a masjid which survived for 500 plus years, and now unfortunately there we are going to see that being replaced by a Hindu temple. But those are some of the stories that we covered this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for those brothers and sisters who sent in their social media messages. It's always great to hear from our listeners. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll be back next week when we'll have a number of stories that we'll be covering next week, inshallah ta'ala. Do try to join in, do try to get involved. 01582 4818 0779 4818 You'll be able to listen to the repeat of this show, I believe, tomorrow, and also the podcast will be available in a couple of hours at time, inshallah ta'ala. Until next week, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at Inspire FM Luton.